Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, you guys can start.
Okay.
Anytime you want.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, just count it in.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the
So now, Chris?
Oh my God! I'm gonna keep your guys.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. Coming up on today's episode, it's a few months late, but Canada finally has an AI strategy called AI for All. Jeff and I are going to unpack what this means for Canadians building skills for the future and where the plan falls short.
We're also going to speak to an expert about heat pumps and demystify how they work, especially in a place as cold as Canada. And we're going to talk with a digital artist who's created a mobile app connecting modern-day Halifax to 1903 Dublin. But before we get to those interviews, here's more on Canada's AI plans and why you should care.
There are many security cameras on the market, but TP-Link offers something special for everyone. For starters, I'm a huge fan of their dual lens cameras. If you haven't heard of this concept, here's how it works. One camera is fixed and the other camera moves. In TP-Link's lineup, the Tapo C675D kit, solar-powered dual-lens pan-tilt security camera kit, is a great example. A fixed wide-angle lens captures the full scene at all times, while the pan and tilt lens roams 360 degrees horizontally to track and zoom in on activity elsewhere. 2 perspectives, 1 device. Plus, just 90 minutes of sunlight recharges the camera for continuous power. For more information, visit TP-Link online, and thanks to TP-Link for supporting the Amber Mac Show.
AI Spotlight.
Well, we've been waiting for a long time, and finally, the federal government has come out with our AI plan for the future. It's called AI for All, and this is after consultations with more than 10,000 Canadians, almost 30 AI strategic task force members. Jeff and I were both watching the announcement live. Jeff, let's start with you. What was your first reaction?
Well, my first reaction is, why can't they ever start any of those things on time? But other than that, this is 6 months overdue. Looking through the actual strategy itself, definitely some promising things. It's nice to see some of these things sort of put down on paper, but also a lot of things that harken back to times when I would not have the optimism that I would like to have about this AI strategy, and we'll touch on that. But as the introduction from the minister says, Canadians want safe, reliable, and sovereign AI. They want the best tools to build a prosperous future guided by our values. And I think that really hits home, and that is a very commendable place to try to get to. So they go through, they talk about different elements of the ecosystem, like AI applications, models, data centers, cloud stuff, energy power research and development. So there's a lot of information in there, and it really touches, just like AI is starting to do, it touches almost every aspect of life in Canada. So there's a bit of background about Canada being an AI innovator and things like that as well. And then they break it down into some key priorities and pillars that we'll talk about in this conversation.
We are definitely going to dive into those pillars and how all of this affects everyday Canadians, including entrepreneurs, small business owners, industry. But one of the things I wanted to stress is there was some repetition around the fact that we have a major adoption gap here in Canada. Only 12% of Canadian businesses used AI to produce goods or services. That was between mid 2024 and mid 2025. I don't really need to go into these numbers, Jeff, because I think we're hearing the same thing over and over again. I'm speaking about AI at keynotes every single week, and the message is kind of the same. Canada is actually behind when it comes to AI adoption, especially within business. But also, we know that Canadians don't have a lot of training about how to use AI, and then Canadians don't trust AI. So it is kind of a triple whammy in terms of our starting point, despite the fact that we have so much history in terms of the evolution of artificial intelligence in the early days of AI.
Yeah, with people like Jeffrey Hinton, who you interviewed, and I sent you a link just the other day about the Canada Trust in AI systems. In the actual government document, they say we ranked 42nd out of 47 on trust in AI systems. The stuff I sent you had Canada dead last amongst all of the countries considered in terms of our trust in AI, and that's interesting, and I think a bit of a commentary on Canada, and not necessarily even a bad one, but it is something that has to be overcome because AI is going to be coming along whether we want it or not. So you know w- it's all about Canada's vulnerabilities for being dependent on foreign providers for infrastructure and AI tools, and how we don't need to accept that. We have these structural advantages. We've got very educated workforce. We've got a huge amount of green energy that we can use to power data centers and things like that. And we can act as a leader in this because we're trusted by other countries who are going through the exact same thing, where they don't really want to look to to the United States or China for leadership on these things.
And I do want to say that there were three guiding principles. You mentioned the minister's opening remarks. That is the Minister of AI, Evan Solomon, who's also been on our show. And he broke this down in terms of trust, opportunity, and sovereignty. The prime minister built on those themes. And I think those are all really great principles in terms of a starting point. The plan itself, I had a chance to scan through it. It's about 10,000 words or so long. So definitely a quick look as soon as that was released. But like you mentioned, there's a bunch of different pillars. And I think the starting pillar in terms of protecting Canadians and safeguarding our democracy, I think is a good thing. And it feels very Canadian to start with these values front and center. Maybe industry doesn't love that, but I certainly like that as a citizen.
Yeah, and I like how it opens up with AI will only deliver on its promise if Canadians trust it. That requires modern privacy and online safety laws, strong national AI safety capabilities, and secure government systems. And I think that is so key, that we have got to be able to provide Canadians with a product that they can have faith in to get them to embrace it. Because as they say, trust is not a brake on innovation. It's the foundation that makes broad, confident adoption possible. And I think that's very true. And I think that's part of where Canadians have their reservations about embracing it as wholeheartedly as other countries might be.
And there was some mention within this section in terms of some of the actions that will happen in terms of modernizing new consumer privacy legislation, introducing online safety laws, the fact that Canada will invest $50 million to expand the capabilities of the Canadian AI Safety Institute. But I do want to stress something here, because I would say, just from reading the reaction from many people who were covering that press event, I think people feel there's a bit of a gap here in terms of not enough around action when it comes to AI safety. I think people were perhaps expecting a little bit more on that, but I would not say that was one of the strong suits of this plan.
Yeah, and so it does talk about things like deep fakes and AI generated disinformation and things like that. And just how data is the fuel for AI, and so we need a way to keep it safe, given that this is how we get these systems to work. We have to be willing to share information with them. um, so new consumer privacy legislation, online safety laws, I'm sorry, but it's hard to be very confident about the Liberal Party of Canada doing a great job on those, given its historic inability to come up with rational legislation that people can get behind. So let's hope they do a better job at that. But something they did mention that I'm not quite sure how it would manifest itself, but they're talking about how it's important also to know, what actually is AI or not. And so they talked about developing capabilities like watermarking AI generated content. Uh, that's great, but like a lot of things in this document, so Canada develops that. Maybe we watermark our own AI content. How do we get other countries to do that who aren't interested? So again, it's a positive step forward, but there are things where there seems to be still you're talking about things that aren't going to quite accomplish what you're looking to achieve in the end.
One of the things too, before we move on, that really struck me is that I'm not sure why this plan was so delayed. And I say that in the context of what we've learned about what's in the plan because as people who are covering what's happening in AI on an almost daily basis, I think it's fair to say that all of the ideas within this plan, and they do feel a little bit like ideas and not a lot of dates assigned to when some of this stuff will happen, but that could have been done months ago. I mean, there's nothing in here that speaks to this moment in time or anything specific around what's happening in, the days and weeks and months to come. So I just want to preface this because I do like a lot of the things that I'm reading, but I'm not sure what took so long to get to this point. Clearly, they didn't use AI for this plan, or it would have been done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and my cynical view about it would be, just as come in the next pillar, empowering Canadians. Uh, th- they've got points in their key actions, and I hope this doesn't rub anyone the wrong way, but the government of Canada commits to applying gender-based analysis in a meaningful way across this is back to the Trudeau years. This is back to the failure state we've been increasingly in for a decade under that kind of leadership. And you see you see them talking about that there's regional considerations and things like that. This is AI. This is going to affect everyone. We don't need to be breaking people up into these little interest groups and then making sure we've got a piece of the pie for them. This needs to work for everyone. And what in the name of heavens a gender-based analysis of anything in this is going to achieve, I have no idea, except for what it has achieved historically, slowing things down, gumming up the works with unnecessarily complicated, just performative measures. And we saw at Toronto Tech Week people complaining about the performative consultations, all this sort of stuff. We have got to shift gears where we can focus on something where we're not looking to make sure that every voter has been accounted for, because this isn't an interest group driven thing. This is the biggest thing that will affect the entirety of Canadian society that we currently have any awareness about. So I wish they'd ease off on that sort of stuff and get focused on some more concrete measures that are actually going to move the ball forward.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit because I'm going to
Sure.
try to read into what they were perhaps trying to say, and I'm not sure if this is what they were trying to say. But I just did some research on this, so I think if I look at this, and I think you're right. I mean, not a lot of details in terms of what exactly that means. But I'd be really curious because we know based on the data that jobs that will potentially be impacted the most severely tend to be jobs that women hold. That is just a fact, right? A lot of entry level jobs, a lot of jobs in healthcare, and the list goes on. The data is out. Anthropic has shared a lot of that data. Second to that, we know that there's a gap in terms of skills, men versus women. So that is a real thing that exists. So I'm not saying that we need necessarily to devote all our attention here, but I'm curious if just the framing of what they actually put in this plan is so vague, kind of like some other parts of the plan, that it's really unclear what they're trying to say here. And I feel like it could be part of that. And I'd be curious, although, like I said, who really knows? And also, let's just be fair.
Mhm.
The first question that one of the reporters asked at the event was about Billy Bishop Airport. So no one really spent
Unbelievable.
as much time as was needed on asking really good questions about this plan.
Yeah, I would love the chance to delve a little bit deeper on that sort of stuff. And so, fair point. It may affect women more, and I have read the data about that sort of thing too. But this to me isn't in there because of that. It's in there because that's in every single solitary government, anything from the Liberals over the past decade. But in any case, empowering Canadians is all about Canada must become an AI skills nation. Where AI is creating good jobs for Canadians, giving access to AI training and education. So they talk about a national AI literacy initiative, offering training to accessible to all Canadians. They talk about partnering with schools and libraries and all that sort of stuff. One interesting point, I think, is Canada will ensure all post-secondary students have access to trusted AI agents, which is that's actually I wouldn't have thought of that as one of the measures, but it's actually fairly compelling, and we know the expenses that can be involved in stuff like that. So, putting that stuff in the hands of the people who are going to go out there and be the next generation to develop it, I think that's totally positive. Then they talk about AI related job opportunities. And that's where I get back into my cynical zone where, okay, sure, you want to create 45,000 jobs through student work placement and Canada summer jobs. Maybe that'll be useful. I'm not so sure. But a point to argue a little bit against myself that I think is fair that is mentioned in here in terms of interest group stuff is for obviously we're a bilingual country. And they mentioned that AI systems deployed within the government will perform equally well in both official languages. I think that is totally fair and totally reasonable. I actually don't know technically how difficult that is or not. But yeah, it's at least shows that that is something that there's a very practical application towards. So I think that's really good. And as the strategy is saying, the benefits flow from adoption.
For more about Canada's AI strategy, on the day that the news broke, Jeff and I did a dedicated segment in the Amber Mac Show podcast feed, so make sure you check it out. Coming up next, how heat pumps work in Canada and why you should make the switch.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
The energy we use in our homes accounts for 20% of emissions, and the biggest driver is burning gas and oil for heat. Heat pumps can deliver 3 to 4 times as much heat per unit of electricity consumed, according to Quilt, and that's why the company is on a mission to move humanity off fossil fuels in the home. To answer all of your questions about heat pumps and our energy transition, Amber spoke with Paul Lambert, founder and CEO at Quilt. Here's their conversation.
That's science.
Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start our conversation talking about the state of energy affordability, the state of energy security. It's a really unique time in the world today where I think people are thinking more seriously about other options to both heat and cool their homes. So, what would you say about what you're doing at Quilt in the context of your mission to change the way we do those things?
So we're a home electrification company, and that's because we believe that electricity is the sustainable energy of the future. And the reason for that is that it can be produced in so many different ways. It's almost like a more general or generic energy than say a log of wood or oil or sun rays directly used by a plant. Many things can create electricity, and so what it does, it allows you to have flexibility in terms of your fuel source. And so by electrifying it's often associated with renewable electricity, so solar and hydro and all those great things. You can also produce most electricity today is in most parts of the world is still produced with fossil fuels. But the whole point of electrification is it gives us that flexibility to create energy independence and and yeah, that ability to create systems that are more resilient and sustainable.
When people start to learn about heat pumps, I think it's a fair statement that very quickly they recognize that this is potentially a better solution for them. But I think adoption has taken quite some time, except in certain parts of Canada. In Atlantic Canada, in Prince Edward Island, where I'm from, I'm amazed because there is a high penetration of people who have heat pumps and it kind of varies across the country. Can you talk a little bit about where we're at today in terms of adoption? And I imagine that chart is on the rise in terms of the number of people looking for heat pumps.
Yeah, so it's growing quickly, but it's coming from a small number. There are definitely pockets like Atlantic Canada, and actually, in the U.S., it's actually the similar. It's kind of the Boston and Vermont area. So it's like there's something about the Atlantic seaboard where they love heat pumps, but um, it heat pumps have been outselling furnaces now for 3 years in a row across North America. They're growing. It's growing every year. Uh, I think part of the reason it takes a while is it's a big investment in a home you're talking about home infrastructure and retrofitting existing homes. And the average person isn't going to go out of their way to, spend a significant amount of money to just change something for a convenience. Either their system is breaking or they're having a really hot summer and they don't have any cooling. So there's sort of these moments that drive people into the purchasing journey, and it just takes some time. And the important part is that we get the message out there and people understand their options so that when that moment comes to them, and it might not come to them for another 4, 5, 6 years, they are aware that there's another option out there and they don't just go out there and buy another furnace or boiler, what it might be, because that locks them into probably 15 years of a worse energy system and a worse experience because you're not going to change that one for another 15 years. So we have to be patient, but it's important that we get the messages and incentives out there today so that as those moments come up, we get people and they're not locked in, like I said, for 15 years to whatever the worst thing is.
It feels to me as someone who has now installed, I'm going to say, almost 10 different heat pumps across my own property or properties that I own, that there is a need for more literacy on how they work. I think a lot of people maybe are a bit confused about the technology
Mhm.
behind heat pumps. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if someone came up to you in a bar or restaurant and said, okay, how do heat pumps work? What is the elevator pitch?
You can put me on the spot. This happens all the time. And also it's because heat pumps are like, let's be honest, is not a great name. They are I'm not going to go where the name comes from. I did not pick it, but it's so established now that it's what we've got. It is essentially an air conditioner that can run in two directions. So the way an air conditioner works is people have heard evaporators and condensers. They may have heard those terms. They're actually referring to a fluid inside of it that either evaporates, and when it evaporates, it pulls in energy so that it can evaporate, or condense, and when it condenses, it releases that energy. So it goes in a cycle and evaporates in one place and condenses in the other, and releases energy, which is heat, or it absorbs energy, which is cooling. And so if you've ever put your hand behind a refrigerator, you know that it's warm, right? And the reason for that is that the inside of the refrigerator is the cool part and where the condensation is happening, and then it evaporates on the outside. So the way a heat pump works, and a refrigerator is a heat pump, AC is a heat pump from an engineering perspective. It's always a hot side and cool side. So it's just moving energy around. And this is a really, really key idea. It's not creating heat. It's not converting electricity into heat. It's like a conveyor belt for thermal energy. And because of that, it gets these wild efficiency scores that it can be more than 100% efficient. And that should sound like it's breaking the law of physics. And the reason it isn't is that it just picks up heat in one place and moves it, just like how a conveyor belt could move something very, very heavy without spending a ton of energy. And so the way a heat pump works in the sense of heating your home, it's just an AC that can run backwards. So when it is cooling, it is literally an AC. I've been asked by people, oh, is a heat pump going to be as good as cooling as an AC, like something that's actually meant for cooling? It literally is an AC. So a heat pump is actually just an AC that has a reversing valve so that when it's in heating mode, it can reverse and run backwards. So imagine you took that fridge and you put it in the side of your wall, and the warm part was on the inside of the house. It would start to warm that room. So that's exactly what happens when it's in cooling mode. It literally is an AC, and when it's in heating mode, it's just reversing. It's backwards, basically ACing the outdoors and heating the indoors. And it just does it insanely efficiently because it picks up energy that already exists rather than creating new energy.
I think the key thing right now where I'm starting to see people pay more attention to the benefits of heat pumps is around affordability. And,
Yeah.
for years, I think I've been waving the flag from an environmental standpoint, but where I see the real awakening is around this topic of affordability. With my
Hmm.
mom, for example, who has heat pumps in her home, where she is saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year. So
Hmm.
so the affordability piece, especially in Canada, this is an especially important topic right now. When you think about those savings over time, what are you seeing from some of your customers?
So it really depends on where they're coming from. So if they're coming from electric heating, and a lot of people have electric resistive heating, and actually in Quebec, there's a lot of electric resistive heating because they've historically had very affordable hydro energy, and obviously the older part of the country and didn't always have the natural gas infrastructure. If you're coming from electric resistance heating, you can see a 4x or more drop in your energy bill for a heat pump. And that's often more than doubled with Quilt because we're the most efficient system, and we automatically ramp down empty rooms. Most rooms, most of the time, are empty. And so if we can cut back an empty room, like you don't need to be heating your living room while you're asleep in your bed in the winter in the coldest part of the year. Most people do that. So very significant reductions in terms of energy usage. So like I said, up to 4x for an average heat pump, you could double that up to 8x with a Quilt system. That's if you're coming from electricity. If you're coming from fuel, so natural gas, or some people still use things like fuel oil and things like that. But if you're coming from one of those, it really depends on the price of gas and the price of electricity. But the fundamental fact is that the heat pump is just by far and away the most efficient way to heat a home. So modern heat pumps are 400% efficient. So they take 1 kilowatt of electricity and they'll turn into 4 kilowatts of heat. So, and a natural gas furnace, the very best ones are going to be 90 to 95% efficient. So they're just not even in the same league.
It's amazing too in terms of how heat pumps can fill a certain need in a home. And I'm going to just go through my own experience with Quilt because it was a very specific need that we had. So we have a 3-story home, and the 3rd story of the house, which is where my son, a teenager, lives, and it was very hot, and it was impossible for us to be able to manage that 3rd floor of the house and manage the temperature there as well as the temperature on the main floor, because obviously for different reasons, the heat is rising, and the 3rd floor was always very, very steamy. So we were able to install Quilt heat pumps, and I mean, it's just been incredible. Like overnight he's sleeping better. We're able to keep actually the rest of the house is just staying cooler. So I mentioned that as a solution, and we live in a house in Toronto which is, again, doesn't have a lot of space between the houses, and it was a very efficient installation process. And we actually were able to put the outdoor unit up on sort of wall mounts outside and still have lots of space for our neighbors to get by. So I mentioned this because I think there's a misconception about heat pumps in terms of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to totally retrofit my home, or I can't do this in my home because I don't have enough room outside. But what Quilt has done is really made a lot of this hardware really elegant and design forward. And I want to bring that up because this isn't like the heat pumps that I've installed in the past. It's something totally different.
Well, yeah, thank you for saying that, and I'm delighted to hear your son is sleeping better. That's awesome. That Similar in our house, I have some young kids, and we used to keep our house, way, way too warm, because in the summer, because the kids would kick the blankets off, and we couldn't sleep well in our bedroom. So yeah, we've invested a lot in the aesthetics. So heat pumps can come in this form factor we call ductless, so no ducting. A lot of people will be familiar with ducting in their house. And they have a central thermostat. That's the way most homes in Canada are heated. And you can do a central heat pump, but you can also do these things called ductless, which put individual units in each room. And there's a bunch of benefits to that. Like you said, you get the room by room control, and you get the better efficiency of being able to ramp down empty rooms. But you do have to put something physical in your room. And the way these were designed before we started the company, we looked at them and said, yeah, on paper they sound great. Like from an engineering perspective, they're very efficient, but they're not something you want to look at necessarily every day. And people care a lot about the inside of their home, and they spend a lot of money on how their kitchen looks, how their bedrooms look, how they're and so we felt like that was an overlooked area of the market, and that we could innovate there. So we put a lot of time and effort and iterations and design into making the smallest unit and hopefully the most aesthetically pleasing, so that people can be proud of what's in their home. And we want people to have pride of ownership, right? It's so important for something as important as your home.
I do want to encourage people too. There'll be people listening to the audio version of this either on SiriusXM or through the podcast. But I do encourage people to head over to our YouTube channel because throughout this interview, you'll be able to see some visuals that show you what the Quilt heat pumps look like, and absolutely incredibly efficient, but also beautiful, which is a win-win in my opinion. I have to say that I have been one of those people on social media over the years who has invested time in trying to educate people about heat pumps. That has at times led to discussions and debates about people who maybe don't have the most up to date information about heat pumps. So let's settle this once and for all. Canadian winters, Canada, is this the right place for heat pumps? What is your reply to that?
So it depends where you live, but for the vast majority of Canadians, the answer is yes. So we are rated down to negative 25 Celsius. And we work below that, but that's what we're rated our heating at. And I just checked. So the lowest temperature reached in Toronto last year, middle of the night, coldest night was minus 20. Halifax was minus 16. Obviously, Vancouver, Victoria, you don't have anything to issue, no issues. Montreal was negative 21. So we can comfortably be primary heating there. If you were in the very middle of the Northwest Territories, like probably not, but most Canadians don't live there, so it does depend where you live. And even in the scenario, so I'm originally from Calgary. Calgary gets cold in the winter. Even in that scenario, if you wanted to have a backup source, we're talking about maybe 1 or 2 nights. it's not a common thing. And so you could still displace probably 98 to 99% of your heating load, even in places like Calgary, Edmonton, or Winnipeg, or wherever you may be. But for, I'd say 80-90% of Canadians, they can be completely safe with just a heat pump. In fact, to be totally honest, one of the reasons we have such great cold climate performance is I am from Calgary and my co-founders are from Boston, and we wanted our parents to be able to use it. So that's why we designed it that way.
And I think it's important to talk about some of the incentives that are available because I have in past also worked with the province of Ontario, for example. Different provinces have different incentives. There are also some federal incentives. So when we think about the incentives for Canadian buyers, we are seeing some programs out there that are making this more affordable in terms of those upfront costs as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, it's a huge help. As I was mentioning before, what the reasons for this, call it maybe slower than some people want adoption, is the fact is it is a large purchase, and that's true for any major home upgrade. Your HVAC system is probably the most important system in your home. I mean, you think about it, if you can't heat your home, you can't really live in your home, right? At least in the winter. Um, and so bringing down that upfront cost allows it to be something that people can do. Say when they know their system is it's going to kick the can in the next 2 years, but we could do it now. Like they can kind of get into that zone instead of waiting for it to break, and also help people make the right decision for themselves and their family and for the planet. Also, I'll say that if it brings heat pumps into cost parity with just a furnace, they get cooling, and the world is heating, and Canada is heating. It is hot, and I didn't have AC growing up, but a lot of people now want AC in Calgary, and if you're just comparing with a furnace, a heat pump can look more expensive. But when you're comparing with a furnace plus AC, which is what you should because it both heats and cools, it's usually less money. So it allows people to get into that zone rather than having to just stick with a heating only solution.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about Quilt specifically because this may be a company that is new to a lot of Canadians. It certainly was for
Mhm.
me. I started following you on social media and was able to connect with the company. You are now in half a dozen different provinces across Canada. Can you talk a little bit about the origins of the company and how you are expanding throughout Canada?
Yeah, so the origin of the company was a few things, but I'd started a company in Vancouver in sort of late 2000s. It was a software company, got the entrepreneurial bug, but I kind of just stumbled into it, to be totally honest, and spent a bunch of time on it. And I told myself, hey, I want my next company be something I can dedicate a lot of time to. I'm probably going to spend at least a decade on whatever the next one is. And that's a big commitment. And to just kind of cut to the chase, I was on paternity leave and realized I worked on a problem that I felt was going to be really important for my kids' generation and help define the decades to come. That no matter what, it, it was going to be relevant for decades, and you're going to feel good about it, and you're kind of insulated from the waves of tech that we both know come big and then they go away. So I mentioned grew up in Calgary, surrounded by the energy system and the oil and gas industry there. So I've always been around energy, and I believe that the energy transition is going to define much of the coming century, and that the climate change and the things around that is one of the most important problems facing the next generation of humans. So the question was, what could we do as at this point I was sitting in Silicon Valley and working at Google to help advance that and accelerate that. And we said, well, where do consumers buy fuels today? And it's cars and homes is the answer. And it's kind of surprising because there's really only two places, even though consumer spending is most of GDP. And Tesla and other companies are doing all these great things to accelerate the transition on the EV side. But there wasn't a company playing that same playbook on the home side, and that playbook is take something that has a bunch of push from incentive from the government and add pull, add consumer desire, create a great product so that people want it and they have that pride of ownership. It's not just they're doing it because there's some money on the table. And that just felt like that was exactly the right shape of problem for the type of founding team I could create. Because we were sitting at Google, I got placed at places like Apple, like really top quality consumer technology talent. And so could we take that out of that tech industry and apply it to this somewhat ignored heat pump industry to create a truly tech native and extremely efficient product standing on the shoulders of giants of what has already been done in that industry. We didn't invent heat pumps, obviously, but we did take what was already there and make it more efficient by applying our technology skills, made it more desirable, easier to use, smaller, and we kind of that was our opportunity to create this company.
I want to just mention because I don't think we touched on this yet, but just so for people who are wondering exactly not just how your heat pumps work, but also from a user perspective in terms of making it a little bit easier. There is an app, and I do want to mention this to people because having installed in the past heat pumps of yesteryear, I understand that there wasn't a lot of technology for the end user to be able to manage those heat pumps. Not only do you have an app, but you also have uh, the coolest lighting system in these heat pumps where
Thank you.
my son feels like he's in some type of gaming utopia. So could you just talk about that piece of it from a user's perspective? Because it feels to me like you've designed Quilt really with the end user in mind to make it a beautiful and warm and accessible experience for the home, which has been the forgotten piece when it comes to heat pumps.
Yeah, thank you again for that. And I mean, one of the first things we did was just talk to people about heat pumps, and I went through it myself. My co-founders also had heat pumps, so we all had sort of first-hand experience, and we just did user research and talked to people. And actually, I remember it was one person who suggested in an interview, said, "Hey, it's kind of up on the wall. Like, I like put some art under there. Like, could you put a light in there?" And I was like, "Maybe we could." And that's even where the name Quilt comes from. So Quilt is a homey name, but it's softer than say Tesla, which is kind of macho, right? It speaks to this more design centric, kind of more feminine side of it. And that was the whole ethos of the beginning of this company is how can we create something comforting and homey and design forward and just a place you want to be in and bring that ethos to the design again so that we could create pull. The people see that and say, yeah, that's the system I want in my house. I want to show my friends and family that that's what's my house, when they come over. So the light, the size, the fact that you can remove the front cover and wallpaper it, paint it, that all comes from that same place of how do we make something that you are really proud of to show your friends and family.
I want to tell you that you might have caused a domestic dispute between my best friend and her husband because after we had Quilt installed, I brought her over to show her both the outdoor unit and the indoor units. And her reaction was, "My heat pumps don't look like that." And then she said, "Can I take a picture and text it to Ryan, her husband?"
Oh
Because
no.
they just installed heat pumps and they're trying to kind of hide them away because they are not so attractive. So I thought that was a great reaction from someone who hadn't seen Quilt before.
Well, I'm sorry, not sorry. I don't know.
My
Yeah.
final question for you really is just about this moment in time. So, kind of looping back to where we started this conversation, I certainly don't
Mhm.
expect you to talk about geopolitics in the next minute or two, but it does strike me that both the federal government and the state of the world leads us here in Canada to be very aggressively searching for new energy solutions. And so, I think it's a very unique time. How has that played into what you're doing?
I think it just goes back to the same thing I said at the top, which is that electrification is the most general energy source. It's like a abstraction layer over others. So by leaning into electricity, we are enabling energy resilience, independence, flexibility for wherever that energy may come from. And so the volatility of the times, I think it just points us towards wanting to electrify even faster than before.
And for people who are listening or watching this conversation and they want to learn more about Quilt and the installation process and what's involved, where is the best place for them to go?
Quilts.com, exactly as it sounds, Quilt.com. We're in 6 provinces right now. There'll be more to come, and yeah, we'd love to work with you.
I would also say follow Quilt on Instagram too, because you guys just posted a picture with the coolest heat pump hat I've ever seen. So if you're,
Thank you. Yeah, we'll send you one.
oh,
It's
I will wear it constantly. It's very cute.
great.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoy the conversation, and it's important to get the word out there about what you're doing. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Quilt, for joining us on this week's episode. Coming up next, we take you from modern-day Halifax to 1903 Dublin with the help of an app and a scavenger hunt. Stay tuned for that conversation up next.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Andrew Burke is a Halifax-based software developer and digital artist who has created a mobile app that connects modern-day Halifax to 1903 Dublin through the lens of James Joyce's novel Ulysses. To share more, Jeff spoke to Andrew about Bloomsday Halifax. Here's their conversation.
Makers.
So you've done a ton of things over the years. I've been exposed to a bunch of your different projects, lots of interesting things there. But today we're going to be talking about your Bloomsday Halifax project. So before we get into that, can you, just in case listeners haven't actually heard of it, can you explain what is Bloomsday?
So Bloomsday is a celebration of the book Ulysses by James Joyce, which takes place in June 16th, 1904, in very specific real places in Dublin, Ireland. And every year in Ireland, on June 16th, people get together and retrace the steps of the various characters in the book in Dublin. And it's known as Bloomsday because one of the main characters in the book is named Leopold Bloom. And it sounds like doomsday. So it's mostly an excuse to wear hats and drink Guinness and such like that. But it is sort of a fun thing that people do in various places. And not just in Dublin, but also in other cities all around the world. They do Bloomsday to celebrate this book. And
And you thought Halifax was a good fit for this, I remember in our previous
Yeah,
conversation.
well, Halifax has a similar sort of architecture, a lot of similar street names, a lot of Irish pubs, and quite a notable Irish community as well. But we in fact have several very distinctive buildings like the Martello Tower down in Point Pleasant, which are also in Dublin. And in fact, certain key things take place in the book in places that are very similar to places in Halifax. So when I moved here, many years ago, I kept thinking, oh, somebody should be doing a Bloomsday event in Halifax. It seems like a no-brainer here, but nobody ever did. So I figured I'd take it on myself. And I'd seen Bloomsday events in places like Toronto and other places, but they've tended to have actors and performances and singing and things. And I'm not the kind of person that can wrangle a whole bunch of acting talent and all that, but I can build an app. So I did it my own way, and I built an app. So
Excellent. And so the Bloomsday Halifax website describes this project as your mobile device is your gateway between modern Halifax and 1904 Dublin in a unique tribute to James Joyce's masterpiece Ulysses. So can you elaborate a bit on that and share what kind of interactions your app facilitates for people who are using it? Basically, what's the experience people are trying to get out of this, and how does that differ from what might be at other Bloomsday celebrations?
Right. So I made it basically a sort of a GPS-powered scavenger hunt. So I've picked out locations in Halifax that mirror the locations in the book where the different episodes take place. There's 18 chapters and sort of 18 locations, and it's all GPS-powered. So you pick a location on your phone, and it shows you sort of a map on how to get there. And once you get close enough within a certain radius of the location, it unlocks the content for that chapter, which includes a summary of what the chapter is, a summary of the location here and in Dublin, excerpts from the chapter, so you can get a sense of what's going on and what some of the language is. And then different ones have different things. You can also collect virtual items. It's a bit like a video game or something. So
Nice.
every location has different item. You can pick up one for each location. So everybody going through will get a different combination of random items from the book, like a mustache cup or a walking stick or a hat or whatever, all these different things. And you can collect those and compare with your friends and all that. And there are a few places also have sort of special activities. Either there's collectible physical items I've sort of planted at the locations. If it's a bar or something, you can ask the staff to give you the photograph or whatever, and things like that. And so there's a bunch of different things that are unlocked. And then over the course of the day, you sort of get this experience of wandering around town and having these experiences, which is sort of what happens in the book.
And if somebody hasn't actually read Ulysses, is first of all, is it going to be, is that going to take anything away from it? And is it the type of thing where they get a decent amount of exposure to the book? Is it something that's going to make somebody want to read Ulysses, do you think?
I like to think that it'd be a way to help people get a sense of what's going on in the book, because it is a bit dense and it's a bit hard to get into when you start reading it without some context. But I've made sure that like every location you get to, it then has a little summary of what happens in that chapter and explains sort of what Joyce is trying to do. He does all these weird gimmicks with language and stuff like that. And then you get excerpts from the text, so you have some things that you've already gotten experience of. Okay, this is what's going on. These are things that are happening, and so that then later, maybe if you do go back and try reading the book, you'll be able to get, oh, okay, this makes sense. I remember this. I went to this place, and this is sort of what I experienced. Um, yeah, Ulysses is one of those. Whenever I talk about it, people are like, "Oh, I always meant to read that and get around to reading that book," but it always sort of scared me off. But it's actually, once you know what's going on and have a bit of a guide, it's actually quite approachable, and it's actually very funny as well. People
And
sort
when
of
you're
underestimate
working
it.
with people, like you mentioned, the bars and stuff like that, where you
Mhm.
might leave something where they're interact. But do people tend to do those relationships start because they know about Ulysses, or how did you just?
Some of the people, surprisingly, people at shops and some of the pubs and things are very much there's always a secret Ulysses fans around, and it's sort of fun that some things are like, "Oh, this is great. What a great idea." And other places you'd think would be really big on it, they're like, "Oh, whatever." But I just sort of, if they look confused, I say, "It's a scavenger hunt. Don't worry about it." People might come in and they might, get some food and just ask them to give, they'll ask you for a thing and you can take the thing.
Awesome. So,
So,
what
yep.
kind of technologies are being used behind the scenes in your Bloomsday Halifax app? And I know you mentioned that you've added in some AI and stuff like that, and I'd love to hear about how that's being used, and anything else that makes the whole experience a little unique.
Yeah, so deep down, it's a Ruby on Rails based content system. Because I'm one of those Rails hipsters from a ways back. It's a React Native app that runs on mobile and on web, and yeah, I do have some connections. Each chapter has something special, or I try to get something special for each episode, and a few of them I ended up, because I started this a few years ago, just as AI was coming up. I made this, and I do a new sort of update it every year. It's given me a chance to sort of do experiments and see what the latest tools can do, how they work, how they compare to the previous years. And just as I was getting started doing this in 2024, actually, was when the GPT OpenAI models were getting really good at language. And since this is all about language, it was actually kind of cool. So what I've done is a few chapters. Some of the later chapters get extremely weird in the book. One of them is done as like a Q&A, whereas there's a question and then there's a big long-winded technical answer, and it sort of explains the narrative as a Q&A. So I turned that into a chatbot where you can ask questions and it gives you an answer, but it's a chatbot that thinks it's 1904 and is specifically very long-winded. So, for example, if you ask it how to get from Halifax to Dublin, it'll say, "Well, you get on a steamship, and then you take your steamship to Liverpool, and then you take another train that goes out to this other place, and you get on a ferry, and then it'll take you to Dublin." And that's because it thinks it's 1904, and it goes very long-winded, and it sort of matches the narrative of the chapter. Um, and I have a few things that generate pictures, and they're sort of surreal pictures, which actually works because that's about what the technology is kind of good for. And I used it a lot for a lot of the sort of the little handout gimmicky things. I actually got some here. I got a little carried away. So they mention in passing the Police Gazette, which is a sort of a men's magazine from the time, and I found the original files in archive.org. They've got microfiche scans of all the old issues. So I found the issues from June 1904, and I've reprinted them on the pink paper they would have been. But the scans were really terrible, and so the pictures were just big blotches of black and white. So I ran them through image generators, and reconstructed all the images for these newspapers. And it's like boxers and stuff like that, and dancers and acrobats and such. And it's been a lot of fun because every year these tools get a lot better. And this year I used Nano Banana, the new Nano Banana Pro from Google. It's excellent. It's keeping it looking like something from 1904, like an old photo, and it doesn't have the sort of the modern smiles problem that a lot of the image generators have, or there makes everything really centered. So it's actually been a really striking improvement over this year. Is the image generation has come through.
Yeah, I
So,
saw some of
yeah,
those too. They look great, and I love the idea of the recreating the old paper and stuff like that. That's so like it reminds me of playing D&D and tea
exactly.
leaving my maps and stuff like that. It's just so authentic feeling. Really gets you into the place.
Yeah, I like to have the idea of the sort of physical artifacts from this old world sort of intruding into the modern world. I like these sort of two layers. Like, it's like you said with D&D. Like, it's fun when you're playing a game. You have props. You have the jug or the little, or whatever. It's kind of fun to have that as an extra thing to make it more vivid.
Absolutely. And so Bloomsday Halifax, as I understand it, takes place, is it June 14th to 16th?
It's the 13th or
Oh,
16th. The 16th this year is a Tuesday, so I figured it would be extended from the Saturday through to the Tuesday, give
a-
people a chance to try it out. Yep.
and if people aren't lucky enough to be in Halifax at that time, is there any way they can experience the Bloomsday Halifax some of that? Is it so you it comes back each year, but are there things you can do in between those dates where the app would have some utility?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of designed around kind of the idea that it's a very limited time. It's like this is a time when it happens because I think sort of the ritual of it being on the particular day, or at least near the particular day, makes it kind of special, like a holiday or something like that. Uh, but um, but if you do end up visiting Halifax and you happen to be a Blooms fan or a Joyce fan, you want to try it out, you can check the website and contact me at info@bloomsdayhalifax.ca, and we can set up a special, like, one-off visitor thing. Partially, you won't be able to probably do the collectibles at the restaurants or do the special events or anything like that because those will be passed. But you at least get a chance to. It's just sort of a unique way to see Halifax. You get to see some different parts of town with a bit of an extra context. So it might be kind of fun. So if you are visiting, yeah, drop a line at info when we can set you up with a special login.
That's great. And so, where can people find out more about Bloomsday Halifax?
It's bloomsdayhalifax.ca. So that's BLOOMSDAY, Halifax.ca, and website. And there's links on there and details, contact info and things like that too.
And it's a web-based app, so it'll work for everyone, which is kind of nice.
Web based, and we're hoping to get it out into the app stores as well. But you never know these days; the app stores are kind of clogged. We're trying to get some stuff out the door. So, but hopefully, yeah, at least it'll be web based. Hopefully on the apps as well. So,
Excellent, and it's
yeah,
always good to have something to aim for next year.
exactly.
So thanks so much for being on the show, Andrew.
You're
I'm
welcome.
looking forward to doing the Bloomsday Halifax experience
Yeah,
this year. That's going to
yeah.
be really fun, and yeah, so thanks for sharing this very unique project with us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew and Jeff, and thank you for listening to today's episode. Coming up later this month, we're going to dive into a conversation about AI computers. And we have more on the green tech front with a better way to handle food waste. As always, you can find our episodes on SiriusXM Canada Talks, online on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.